Washington State at Washington. The Apple Cup. I like that. Saturday at 4 o'clock. Washington is a 16.5 point favorite. Woo, big spread. Big
Mhm.
spread on the rivalry game. Over under at 67.5. Washington is obviously coming off a gutty performance, a gut check Saturday, as some might call it, where they won 22-20 in a torrential downpour at Oregon State. Um, we highlighted that game earlier this week. We reacted to it. You can go back and check that. But you know, I thought it was a pretty good win considering the conditions and um, I feel like they defied the odds a bit. They won a game maybe they weren't supposed to. In some cases, definitely Vegas thought they weren't supposed to win. Vegas had Oregon State favored, and Washington has played some close games this year. Mason kind of got the TCU thing from last year going on over
Mhm.
the last few weeks. And our Washington fan base, man, I'm sure that they have just had some sweaty Saturdays.
Yeah.
Um, and that that's what having a good college football team to root for is all about. And Washington fans know that as good as anybody. They've had a good team the last couple of years. But let's we can jump into these numbers, and I'm going to kind of highlight the Washington defense here because the Washington offense is really good, guys. A newsflash: if you're just joining us, if you just crawled out of a cave and you haven't paid any attention to college football this year, Washington is the number one passing offense in the country. Um, 354 yards per game. That's actually come down some, and they're still number one in in the country in passing yards per game. But we'll go with the defense first, and I'll come back and I do want to talk about that rushing offense for a minute. But defensively, this Washington crew is allowing 392.8 yards per game. That's 101st in the country. And the way that's divvied out is through rushing yards. They give up on average 141 yards per game. That's 49th in the country. Passing yards per game, 251.8. That's 121st. And then they average giving up 23.2, which is 49th in the country. So kind of a bend don't break style, I guess you could say, for Washington, but they definitely allow teams to get up and down the field, and it seems like a timely defense. I think is what we said in our reaction video. They had timely stops last week, and that's what we've seen time and time again. Um, I think there are some playmakers on that defense, but overall, they've got some work to do as far as recruiting and things like that this year. Um, Now let's move over to the Washington State. I want to kind of highlight this offense for a minute. Yards per game, 445. That's 18th in the country. Rushing yards, they're ranked 125th at 95.9. Not a good rushing team. More than happy to just step back, throw the ball. Cam Ward has got a bunch of yards this year, 3,415. He's had a good year. It's been up and down, but overall the numbers have been pretty good. He had a turnover bug there for a little bit, and we'll kind of highlight that. Um, Passing yards per game, they're 349.6 and that's second in the country. So we've got the number one passing offense and the number two passing offense in this game right here. Um, and then 32 points per game, that's 37th in the country, which is not great considering those offensive numbers there. Um, but defensively, man, they give up almost just as much as what they gain. I mean,
Mhm.
that yards per game, 116th. Rushing yards per game, 104th. Passing yards per game, 120th. 20 points per game, 27.1. That's 79th in the country. So this Washington State defense is porous. I mean, they give up pretty much any way you want it, you got it. Unless you're Colorado last week, because they absolutely donkey stomped Colorado. Just made Prime look like he was ready to cry on the sideline. Um, so with that being said, I feel like Washington State does come into this game with a little bit of momentum after that explosion last week. So now we kind of looked at some of the numbers. What are some of the numbers that you're looking at, and what's your feel for this game this week in the Apple Cup?
Well, I think first of all, you have to look at the motivation in this game. There's motivation in the Apple Cup beyond the rivalry for both of these teams here. For Washington, they're playing to finish out their season undefeated, right? And they've got a chance to get into the college football playoff if they can beat likely Oregon, next. Well, yeah, I guess you can say next week at this point. Which getting into the college football playoff now, it looks like more of a possibility as Florida State just lost their starting quarterback. That's something that you have to factor in now. They're not competing with them as much as they were, prior to Travis's injury. So the Huskies are in a great position to win out and make the playoffs. And while Washington State would love nothing more than to beat Washington and spoil those hopes and aspirations, they too have something to play for, because if Washington State wins this game, they improve to 6 wins and become bowl eligible. So there's motivation on both sides here that I think is important to kind of point out. But the crucial matchup to watch here for me, and this is no surprise, but it's the defensive side of the ball, right? what what player specifically, what defense comes up and makes stops, and what player specifically is going to be able to come up with a couple of big plays and force the opposing team to punt or force turnovers. You already mentioned this. I'm going to go over this really quickly, though. Washington's offense ranks number one in pass offense. Washington State is two. Washington's total offense is eighth with 482.8 yards per game. And while the Cougars ranked just 48th in total offense, and but that passing attack that the Cougars have, I think that still poses a pretty significant threat to Washington's defense that seems to play with that bend but don't break sort of mentality that we've seen for them all year. We've seen them come up and make plays. They've been very opportunistic on the defensive side of the ball and gotten the turnovers when they need to and gotten the big stops when they need to. But what happens if they're not making those big plays, right? I kind of wonder if luck's been on their side a little bit. Huskies fans, don't jump all over me. We know we have a huge Washington fan base. I'm just anxious to see them get a little bit more tested. It seems like there's always an out for them, and they kind of wiggle their way out of some pretty stressful situations. And that's the mark of a good defense too. Don't get me wrong, but again, I'm wondering how much of that is luck and how much of that is them having playmakers, going out there and just making plays. So these defenses are the big question marks in this game, ranking 83rd and 84th in total defense, right? So it's kind of, these teams are very similar, right? First and second in passing defense, or excuse me, in passing offense, and 83rd and 84th in total defense. I happen to think that Washington is a good bit better on defense than this statistic would suggest, but again, they have given up a lot of yards and found ways to make big stops. So what happens when the playmakers don't get the big stops? Scheduling here is interesting too, as Washington is coming off of 3 intense games in a row. They went to USC and won by 10, beat Utah at home by a touchdown, and narrowly escaped Corvallis with a 2-point win last week. Do they have one more in them? Right. That's kind of the question: is how much more is left in the tank? Especially knowing that likely Oregon is lurking in the conference championship next week. How much are they looking ahead to that? It's interesting from that scheduling perspective. And then you've got Wazoo that went on a 6-game losing streak after starting off red hot on offense, but looked back to form last week against Colorado where they scored 56 points. So a little bit of a Jekyll and Hyde there for Washington State. What version of their offense do we get? Are they going to put up 40 points this week? I mean, or are they going to lay an egg like they have and put up 17? We don't know what we're going to get out of Cam Ward in this offense. This game to me has all the makings of a trap game. You add in the rivalry aspect, and I think this game is going to be pretty close. Give me the underdogs to keep it closer than the experts think, but ultimately, I think that they do lose the game, but give me Washington 44, Washington State 33. I like the overplay in this one. Again, I mean, it's pretty easy to see. I don't think that this number is high enough. The over under at 67.5. Two pretty bad defenses, two really good offenses that like to pass the ball. Also, another thing to think about is how fast Washington State plays. They don't take their time. You know, last week you saw Oregon State, who's very methodical, they run the ball more. They want to secure time of possession and kind of rule that stat. Washington State doesn't play that way. There's going to be a lot of possessions in this game, so for that reason, I like the overplay. But I do think that Washington still comes out with the win and a 2-score win at that.
Yeah. Yeah, I like that prediction a lot. I think that Washington State is at a clear disadvantage in this game, and the fact that they're not even going to try to run the ball. They're not. I mean,
Mm-hmm.
they got a running back named Nakia Watson. I'm sure nobody's heard of him. 257 yards for the year. That's the leading rusher
Yeah.
for the team. Um, they've rushed for like 500 yards this year, and when you're talking about we're in week 13, that's just not even many attempts, not even trying to run the football. I don't think Washington State is going to be able to stop Dylan Johnson. I think he's going to have a really, really big day. I think that he runs for about a buck 50 in this game, and I think that's the difference maker in this game. I keep saying it with this Washington team. For Washington to hit covers and win ball games without stress, they've got to be able to run the football consistently. Okay, the average rushing yards for the year per game 124. That's 103rd, as we said, in the country. If this Washington team could run for 150 yards a game, they would be damn near unbeatable. They would be really, really hard to beat.
Mm-hmm.
Their worst offensive performances have came when they haven't ran the ball well. That's a clear advantage in this game. They have it's green light go. Simon says run it. Okay. This Washington defense sucks. Washington State, excuse me, defense sucks.
Yeah.
It's a green light. It's time to go. So that's what I want to see from Washington this weekend. They're just fine getting a 14-point win here, 10-point win. That's going to be fine.
Yeah.
That's all you need. You just got to win this game. I don't think you want it to be close. I don't think you want a stressful game going into that Friday night. I mean, it's going to be a short week heading into the Pac-12 championship. That game's on Friday.
Mm-hmm.
So, and we got corrected on the comment section. It's in Las Vegas, the championship, and we also got corrected. We don't know that it's against Oregon yet.
Right.
Okay?
Yeah.
We're going to break down the Oregon game here in just a few minutes, but there are some things that could happen. I don't think it's likely, obviously, but there is a way that Washington could be playing Arizona in
Mm-hmm.
the conference championship game. And like I said, don't think that's happening, but it's a possibility. Not something Washington even needs to worry about anyway at this point. But just a little side note on that. I like your call, Mason. I'm right there with you. I'm going to take Washington State to cover the 16.5.
Mm-hmm.
But barely. And I'm actually, in reality, I'm not going to bet this game. I don't think. And I'll tell y'all that right now. I don't know if I would bet this game because there is a chance that Washington just scores 63 points this weekend, getting tuned up and ready for that championship game. I mean, there is a possibility. So if you are going to play something, I agree with you, Mason. Play the over, and that's probably something I'm going to go ahead and hit right now
Mm-hmm.
because that number is probably going to be ticking up as the week goes on. Don't you think?
I do think I did look at a model before we hopped on, and it was right around 61. What it spit out for the total on that game. So statistically, I think there's a reason to suggest that it could be actually under the 67.5. So maybe Vegas kind of sticks with where it's at, but I don't see anybody slowing down in this game. It's going to be all downhill.
Yeah. Yeah, I'm with you. Look, and you talk about motivation, something that kind of slips people's minds. Washington State has 5 wins.
Yeah.
Okay, they're not guaranteed a bowl game right now. They might go even if they don't win, but they might not.
Yeah.
If they win that 6th game, they're going to a bowl game. So, this is their Super Bowl. This is it to get those extra 15 practices, to get early signees in there and getting them practicing with the crew. This is a big deal for Washington State as well as Washington. So, definitely motivation on each side. Cannot wait to watch this game at 4 o'clock on Saturday.